Hi, welcome to the Bookish Quilter, where we talk about quilts and we talk about books. My name is Barbara, and today we're going to talk about scrap organization. Because I'm primarily a scrap quilter, I have scraps rather than a stash, and the way that I organize them is quite a bit different from the way people who have larger pieces of fabric in their stash organize theirs. I found out early on that I do not like to pre-cut, and I do not like to organize by color. It just doesn't work for me. I have a lot of pieces of 2.5-inch strips, nicely organized by color, sitting in a big box that hasn't been touched for several years. What works for me is organizing my scraps by fabric that plays together nicely, that can be put together into a project, even if I have no idea at the time what that project is going to be. I store my fabrics in project bags or boxes. These could be Ziploc bags, they could be shoe boxes, they could be meat trays, it could be anything that you can put all the fabrics together in one place. As I go along, I find sometimes I'll look at one of my bags or boxes and say, this would make a great whatever quilt. And in that case, I will start cutting the pieces and put them right back in the box, so when I'm ready to sew, there they are, all cut. And I'm going to turn the camera now and show you some examples of some of my bags and boxes of projects, future projects. So here we go. One way I like to sort my fabrics is by theme or type of fabric. For instance, Christmas fabrics, Civil War reproductions, children's novelty prints, etc. This is a little bag of pieces, some of which are sewn together, that came to me just like this. And these are all 30s reproductions. And actually, when I opened it up, the sewist wanted to start a rail fence quilt. I have 30 some odd of these little blocks, all sewn together. I also have extra strips, and I have some extra yellow and green fabric. So my idea for this is I'm going to see however many blocks I can make from the extra fabric. I know I can get at least enough to make a total of 36. I'm hoping I could do 42 to make either a little quilt 6x6 or 6x7 blocks, and then add the yellow and green fabric for the borders and binding. So again, this is sorting by type of fabric. My friend Sharon loves very soft, feminine pastel prints. And many of these are her prints, but I filled in with some other scraps that I had. As you can see, I have aqua, yellow, pink, soft green, and then I have a little bit of a beautiful taupey fabric too, right here, a pale taupe. There's a lot of fabrics with rosebuds. There's some little geometric things such as polka dots, ginghams. I have a little bit of tonals in here. I threw in a soft solid yellow because it was similar to the yellows in the prints. This was extra binding fabric from a quilt I made a number of years ago. And this I am planning on obviously making a little girl's quilt. If I don't have enough, my plan is to add solid white fabric or a white tone on tone. And I don't have a particular pattern in mind for this at this point. But they all go together in their little bags because someday I will. larger pieces of fabric suitable for backings. I will try to find other fabrics that will go with it so I can piece it together into a backing. I have a piece of fabric 2 yards long of this blue and white pin cord. I know it's not a traditional backing fabric, but it's not terribly heavy and it'll certainly work with quilt weight fabrics. So what I did, I pinned a little scrap of paper telling me the size of this piece of fabric. So now I know what I need to add to it when I want to use this as a backing. I do have 2 other larger pieces of blue and white fabrics, actually 3. This one I have 2 1/3 yard pieces of this blue and white floral, and I have 3/4 of a yard of this blue and white floral. So when the time comes for me to need a backing, I can work with these and piece it together and come up with a back. And again, scrap of paper with the size of the piece really is helpful. That way you don't have to stop and remeasure. I do long arming, and when you long arm, you wind up with a lot of long, narrow scraps that you cut off from the sides and tops and bottoms of your quilts. And I have customers who use similar colors over and over again, and I wound up with quite a bit of related type of fabrics. So I have several different black tone-on tones over here, and I have other black prints with bright colors. For instance, something like these. So they all go in one bag. Blacks and brights and whites and brights. Here are whites and brights. Something like this. Something like this. This one. And then I threw in some other scraps that are not necessarily long arming scraps. In a bag of scraps I was given by somebody, I found a few of these layer cake squares, maybe 7 or 8 of them. They're bright, they all have a little bit of black in them, so they're going in the bag. I have some black and white polka dots. To me, black and white polka dots is a classic neutral fabric. That's going in. So this will probably wind up being the back of a quilt that I would piece from 2.5 inch strips like I did for the back of my Narragansett Blues. And I also will probably use some of the black tone-on tones as an accent fabric in the front of a quilt. So again, I do store my little strips left over from my quilting customers. Another good way of starting is with the focus fabric. I had a piece of this very vibrant flamingo print fabric, and what I did with it was I fussy cut the fabric the best I could into 6.5 inch squares. I was only able to get 5 of them, but I do have some more scraps of this fabric, and I was able to pull together a lot of other fabrics that are very vibrant and will go with them. Like this, or this. I have several shades of purple. As you can see, there's light and dark purple in the quilt. I have a little bit of solid I may or may not use. I'm not really a fan of solids, but the color's good. I don't generally mix batiks, but this batik is just so perfect that I'm going to put that in with it. And this, even though style-wise it's quite different, I just love the colors. So my plan is to cut 6.5-inch squares from some of the other fabrics and then border them randomly with scraps. And we'll see how large of a quilt that's going to give me. But I will take the 5 flamingo fabrics and disperse them evenly throughout the top of the quilt. So again, this is starting with a great focus fabric. You noticed when I started talking that I was standing in front of a Hunter Star quilt. That's a quilt that I actually purchased the fabric for and made as a workshop project for my guild. I taught a class called Foolproof Hunter Star. And I had the fabric for several years before I knew what to do with it. It was a half-yard bundle I had bought on sale. And when I made up the quilt, I purchased the cream-colored background fabric and the outer border. The darker colors in the blocks, the inner border, and the binding were all from my half-yard bundle. I also, after the quilt was finished, I found after the top was finished, I was vending at a quilt show in Connecticut, and the guild had a boutique room where the guild members donated fabrics and patterns and stuff that they didn't want any longer. And I was able to purchase a fantastic large piece of a cheater fabric that looks like pineapple blocks. And the colors are just perfect for my quilt. So I was able to run a long row, 45 inches wide, by the length of my quilt down the back. I didn't have enough of this left to do a second row. But I then bought a tiny green reproduction print similar to this green, split it in half, so I had the pineapple running down the center, the green on both sides, and that is the back of the Hunter Star quilt. I have a piece large enough to do something with. It's the width of fabric by about 24 inches, and I'm undecided. I was going to make a table runner. Now I'm thinking maybe I will use it as a second quilt because I do have quite a bit of scraps left from the Hunter Star quilt. This is the other green I had used. Again, tiny little reproduction print. And the various fabrics from the front. So this is something I want to use the fabrics together, have not yet decided what I'm going to do with them. If you watched one of my earliest videos, I did a quilt that I call Brick Patio. And I had a finished one hanging behind me as I spoke, but I then showed you how to make it, and I had a second quilt going. The original quilt was dark browns and greens, and I did one with more fun, bright fabrics. I had made a couple of rows at the time of the video and had all the pieces cut out for a second one. So this goes in its own little box, and this is a great leader and ender project. And again, if you're not sure what leader and ender projects are, I had a video a couple of weeks ago. So generally when I have a project cut out and ready to sew, I'll put it in a box rather than a bag. It just makes it easier for me. is a wonderful batch of very small strips of fabric. They seem to all be one or two different lines of fabric. They all coordinate well. And unfortunately, they're not all the same width. I thought if they were, I would have a easier time deciding what to do with them. But I do have a possible project in mind, and if I do that project, there will be a video. Some of the pieces in the box were larger, and I also found in the same box a lot of these polka dot fabrics. And they were not cut into strips, so I don't think they were planned for the same project as the florals. But the colors go together, and I said that's a little different. It'll add a little different scale to whatever I decide to do. I then also found a couple pieces of this fabric, this little teeny weeny floral print that I think will work just fine with the florals in this box. So I added that. This could be a border. And that is that box. This is an amazing bag of pieces that were obviously meant to be something. And I have no idea what the person was going to do with them. They're all beautiful Oriental style florals in cool colorways, predominantly purples and blues, which I love. And they're small pieces sewn together. At first I thought this was like the end of a row, but this is the entire bag is filled with strips like this. I mean, I have a whole bag full. And this is something I really want to have the project totally planned before I start, because the fabrics are just so gorgeous, and I really want the project to be special. As I said, when I have a project that is ready to work on or in the works, I put it in a box. This is a project I started a couple years ago, and I've been working on and off. It's, please don't go with it. It's Bonnie Hunter's Hopscotch Butterscotch. It's from one of her books, and I have it quite a ways done. It consists of blocks like this. As you can see, I have 12 of the 20 blocks completed. Now, I changed mine a little bit. In her book, these little squares were all different. I wanted the squares to match the darker rectangles in each block. And each block is different. And I have about 8 more to go. The border is plain strips like this, alternating with light and dark strips like this. And I have these all cut and ready to go. The corners of the quilts are 16 patch blocks. So I have my 4 16 patch already. Between the blocks, there's sashing and cornerstones. So I have my horizontal rows all pieced with the cornerstones added, and I have my vertical sashing pieces all cut. So that's ready. These pieces here are the rows for several more blocks. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 more of those ready. They need to be pressed and put together. And then these are my leftover block pieces. So keeping them in a box, all nicely organized, is a real easy way that I'm likely to pick up and work on when I have a few minutes. So that gives you some idea as to what I do with my scraps. And as I said, if you have a lot of small scraps as opposed to larger pieces, this is a good way to organize them. And I found I definitely am far more likely to use my scraps when I do it this way. It's just easier. First, you've got all your colors and fabrics together, and then when you come up with an idea, you can sit and cut them all out, put them back in the box, and then when you want to sew, start sewing. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and we're going to move on to the book review. Now we're going back to the book I'm going to talk about today. It's a 20th century classic. It's a fairly large book. It's a multi-generational family saga, and it's a piece of regionalism. It's John Steinbeck's East of Eden. East of Eden is basically a retelling of Genesis, of Cain and Abel, of fathers and sons, of sibling rivalry, carried out over several generations. It starts during the Civil War with Cyrus Trask and his sons, Caleb and Adam, and continues through Adam's sons, Aaron and Cal. It starts in a farm in Connecticut and goes out to Salinas, California. The description of the Salinas valleys are breathtaking, and the characters are fantastic. You'll meet some of the most wonderful characters you ever wanted to meet in the bodies of Sam Hamilton, who is actually John Steinbeck's grandfather. Sam Hamilton was a Irish immigrant who went out to California. He was a very bright man. He bought a farm that didn't have water, yet he could dig wells for all his neighbors. He patented many ideas that never made any money, and he raised a large and equally wonderful family with his very religious wife, Eliza. Another character is Lee. Lee is Adam's Chinese servant, only servant isn't quite what he really is. To the rest of the world, Lee is a humble Chinese servant. To Adam, he's a confidant and a dear friend. He's a brilliant man in his own way, equally as brilliant as Sam is. The book also has what is to me the greatest female villain I've ever read, in the character of Kathy Ames Trask. She is horrible, to put it mildly, but as I said, she's a very unforgettable character. They all are, really. And I hope you'll give the book a try if you haven't read it. As I said, it's a fairly large book. I'm going to look at my copy as the Penguin paperback version. And I think it's 600 something pages, 500. No? 601 pages. So it's a fairly large book. It's not huge, but well worth the read. I had read it many years ago, didn't really remember it, but always wanted to reread it, and it was well worth the reread. So even if you've read it in the past, pick it up again. Well, I hope you've liked this video. I hope it gives you some idea of ways that you can sort your fabric so that you're maybe a little more likely to use those scraps. I know since I started sorting this way, I've finished more quilts for sure. So I hope you liked the video. If you have, like, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you very soon. I'm going to be shooting another video soon, possibly as soon as later this afternoon. So have a great day, happy reading, happy quilting, and I will see you next time.